A very good evening to all of you, and welcome to this webinar on reimagining businesses due to change in customer expectations. I welcome all the participants and all the panelists. Today I have with me Professor Sujit Sen Gupta, Mr. Pradeep Srivastav, and Dr. Pankaj Rawal. A very warm welcome to all of you. So let's begin with what are the changes that have taken place in the recent past in the customer expectations due to the onset of COVID. Now, there are three things that I have been able to see. I am just sharing my slide with you. There are three things that I have been able to see. Number one, the change in the customer engagement model on account of the necessity to have social distancing in place. You can see this slide here. The second thing that I have been able to see is the change in the media consumption habits of the customers. And the third thing is customer focus from price and value, from brand loyalty to price and value equation. Now let's look at this. If you see the sales funnel, traditional and now, we had awareness and interest which was being dealt through the traditional media, whether it's the broadcast media or it's the print media, and rest of the three levels of this particular funnel were being dealt with the help of the physical interaction between the salesperson and the buyer. But now, with the onset of this new situation, we're trying to reduce the physical touch points with the consumer. And that's where the digital transformation comes in handy. Now, what is happening here is that the social selling is replacing the prospecting that we used to do earlier by physically going to places and meeting customers and finding out who is my customer. Now, what's happening is we have data analytics and we have big data. These things are doing customer profiling online on the social media platforms. And this helps us in customer acquisition. The second thing is artificial intelligence and machine learning. These are the things which are throwing up the most appropriate product and brand options for the customers online based on their specific profiles and their preferences, which is helping in the stages of consideration and even intent. Then we have the price comparison engines. The price comparison engines help in the evaluation stage where the customer can evaluate which brand to purchase. And finally, with the click of a mouse, they can purchase the product. So that's how we are reducing the physical touch points. There is another thing which has come up is the omni-channel marketing. Now, omni-channel marketing enables customers to have a consistent experience across various platforms. Say, for example, you book a holiday in Disneyland, say on your desktop at home through their website. And once you land up there and you want to know where a particular event is happening there, you just have to see the app on your phone and it will tell you where exactly to go. So here, all these platforms are very much integrated with each other. There is a data sharing which is happening, because of which the customer can pick up from where the customer has left. So that's how we can reduce the physical contact between the consumer and the seller. So that's what I mean when I say that there has to be a change in the consumer engagement model. The second point that I talked about was the shift in the consumer's focus from brand loyalty to price value equation, because we all understand that the amount of money that is in the hands of the consumers has drastically reduced. So a recent Nielsen survey indicated that the small time brands like Harvest Gold and Tasty Treat, their sales has increased in double figures, 25 to 30%, as compared to all the other well-known brands. The reason is simple, that these brands are cheap and they offer you value. They offer you good quality. The third thing is media consumption habits of the customers. Now, customers have been logged in for a very long time, and the only place where they could spend most of their time has been on the internet, on the digital media. Therefore, the marketers have to rework their advertising strategies so as to be where the consumer is. I request all the participants to go through the article which I have sent you through email, which talks very much in detail about all these things that I have just spoken about, since we do not have a very long time here available here. So I've just touched upon these. Now I hand over to Dr. Pankaj Rawal, because he's going to talk about the media consumption habits of the customers in detail. Over to you, Pankaj. Pankaj, I think you need to unmute yourself.
You unmute, yeah.
Hello? Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes, it's okay now.
Okay. Yeah. When we are talking about the current crisis, when a lot of disruptions have happened and there is a lot of uncertainty in the environment, people are having a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. Nobody knows what is happening. Nobody is able to handle this situation. And people are still trying to figure out that what is going to happen. Now, in this situation, the brands also have to keep themselves relevant. Now, actually, what I'm going to talk about, what we discussed about, is that how brands are communicating, how organizations are communicating, what are the ways and means of how to send their messages across to the consumer, what messages to be sent. So I'll be touching upon these points during these disruptions, that how things have changed in this area. So now brands, they have to keep themselves very relevant, and they have to actually keep a positive image of their brands, and they are still figuring out that what kind of messages they should be sending out. So in my opinion, what I think, there are two very important key points which should be which actually matter in this scenario. One is very strong leadership, which has to be there, and second is effective communication, which has to be towards internal and external stakeholders. When we say internal stakeholders, at this time, when we say communication, the communication is very important for internal stakeholders, because external stakeholders, we say consumers and other stakeholders are there, but right now, very important part is internal stakeholders. So we will just discuss now how the dynamics have changed. Now, every crisis has a life cycle. Now, in this life cycle, there are various stages. When we talk about this life cycle, there are various stages. Now, each stage has its own emotional needs. Each stage has its own emotional effect on the stakeholders, like consumers who are going through different phases of this life cycle, the internal stakeholders, employees who are going through the different life cycle. So there are stages, they are going through the stages. So each stage requires different treatment. Each stage has a different need. Each stage requires a different treatment of communication also. So let's see that what kind of communication we are talking about, what kind of communication each stage requires. Now we talk about a study by McKinsey here. Now McKinsey says that there are 5 stages for this current crisis, COVID-19 we are talking about. The first stage, there would be confusion. People would be anxious. And now during this stage, the communication required is clear instructions, information to encourage calm, safety, fundamental. There are a lot of alignments which are happening. So how these alignments are happening, new operational rules, new changes, how companies are going to work. So all of these, but the communication has to be instructional. So it has to be an instructional way of communication, and positive worded instructions, no use of don'ts or negative worded instructions, sharing best practices and positive behavior, like Walmart did. Walmart gave instruction of 6-20-100 guidelines, which is basically 6 feet distance, 20-second hand wash, and 100-degree Fahrenheit. If temperature is there, then you change. You don't go to public places. So simple instructions during this period and only instructions. That is the kind of communication is there during this period. Second period is resilience, or they have called it resilience, which is worn down. People are uneasy. Now, in this period, the communication to internal stakeholders should be positive stories, chances to connect, build communities, and long-term plans. So people are making communities, sharing a lot of positive stories, sharing a lot of making communities, and then the company has to share, the leader has to share long-term plans. So that is the communication. I will be discussing about this method later on. Then, if the people know that there is a plan in place, then there's a calming and motivating effect in this period, right? So it is very imperative that leader has to tell that there is a plan, and that communication has to be there accordingly. Then there are phases of return, reimagination, and reform. And here people have sense of loss. Then people are ready for the change, and then new vision for the future has to be communicated. A new mantra, how organization actually is going to now reshape, how organization is actually going to come up. So a new vision, a new future, a new mantra, a clear vision. This is the time for communication to internal stakeholders. That is what is McKinsey suggests. Now, we have some examples of instructive communication, which Mr. Anand Mahindra and his team has been sharing with the people. So this is the tweets. If you see number 2, press the reset button and recalibrate all costs and overheads. Associates will have more time, solicit their ideas and business improvement. So he's instructional way of communication that solicit their ideas, associates' ideas, right? Use the lull to build deeper personal relationship with customer. So you see the communication which is dated March 16. Now the further communication, if you see through tweets and through other communication mode, Mr. Anand Mahindra, this is regarding the migrants, and he's saying that he's instructing the group to work on how we can help uplift them and their families, both in the short and long term. Then there are various communication to internal stakeholders to rise during this time, because they have Mahindra Rise name. So rise during this period, and people are actually talking about face shields, and then manufacturing hand sanitizers in their organizations. So he's basically appreciating their effort. Now, there are 3 key points here. The first point is, what is the frame of mind of people over here right now, and what is the desired mind frame? So communication should fill this gap, the current frame of the mind of the people and the desired state. Second is, effective communication requires transparency and timeliness now, and putting employment first. Why I say putting employees first? Because in this time, the information should first go to employees. They have to be associated with the organization. Employees should not get the information from outside the world. So this is the very, very rule of engagement, very, very important rule of engagement, that the communication has to go to employees first. And the third is that frequency of communication has to increase, because at this time, there's a lot of information, because people are on digital platforms. So it is very difficult to digest a lot of information. So the frequency has to go high from the organization point of view. Now, there is an Edelman company. Now, this Edelman has a trust barometer report. So they have surveyed, and they came out with this report that 60% Indians who were surveyed, they said they have started using new brands because of innovative and compassionate way the brands have responded to the coronavirus. So this is very important point, that how people are actually judging the brands right now. And 60% people surveyed, they have started using new brands. 80% of people say that their purchases will depend on how well the brands respond during this period. So people are watching. 90% of respondents want brands to do everything they can to protect their family well-being and financial security of employees. So people also want brands to be very, very, very empathetic towards their employees. 90% of respondents want that. So now, looking at these figures, looking at these trust barometers, organizations have actually responded. I will share you about that in my future slides. But you talk about managing expectations right now. So am I overstepping the time? No. So managing promises and expectations, you were talking about managing expectations. So companies and organizations, they have to tell about their service levels, that these are the service levels, so that the consumer do not have very high expectations. Only managing expectations means manage that expectation which you can actually fulfill. So your ad campaigns, your communication should be aligned, that because during this time you also have some issues in supply chain management and other areas. So you have to set an expectation level that this is what is to be expected, so that there is no gap in expectation and actual service delivery, and which leads to dissatisfaction. This is no time to hard sell, but this is time to reinforce the values that define organization. And basically the brand messaging has to be in sentiment with the audience, in sync with the audience. This is the time to actually demonstrate brand promise to current our customers, the customers who we have customers, existing customers, because the acquisition, we should not be focusing on acquisition. The current acquisitions will amplify this message within their communities. So how do we actually do this? We have to fulfill our brand promise in action. Asian Paints, we have seen Asian Paints doing it. Now this is another fine example of Tata. Now Tata is actually appreciating their the truck drivers who are in service, who cannot work from home in this period, and they are actually going out and serving the country. And the Tata has come out with a fantastic, fabulous ad and message for this community. Now just look how this community will be forging bonds with Tata Motors, because this is really touching the chord, actually touching the chord. Then you have कल का मजबूत जोड़ के लिए आज थोड़ी दूरी maintain करो. This is family call, again using their own core मजबूत जोड़ and then bringing it in the communication part. Then you have this makers of Smirnoff and Johnny Walker. They have come out with this raising the bar concept, where they will be actually tying up with the bars and supplying them the PPCs and their hygiene kits and helping them with digitizing for payments. So they will be forging associations with their customers, with their stakeholders, external stakeholders. We have lots of stories. We have stories of ITC hotels turning their hotels into healthcare infrastructure. Now, in this time, the PR is very important. Now, this time, this is another communication tool which is being used very well with the organization, and this is the time to use this tool rather than advertisements. For example, Asian Paints came out with the first this statement that they will be raising their staff salaries to boost morale. You have just read that Edelman research that a lot of people are concerned that brands should be actually concerned about their employees. And Asian Paints came out with this staff salaries boost, which actually caught the eye of everyone, I know at least. The second came out from the Airtel, which says that from April onwards, salaries of 25,000 staff of distributors and retail franchisee will be paid by them. So just imagine all franchisee, distributors, their employees of Airtel and people, how much they would be appreciating this kind of action, which I should say, from these companies. Then Mahindra and Mahindra Group coming out with the low-cost ventilators, helping government with the face shields. An earned piece of news in media definitely makes positive impression than an advertisement. So a lot of companies are putting more efforts in PR, because that is putting the right message across their consumer base. Similarly, Pizza Hut and KFC, they have been giving these food to front-end people in the industry, and then Bisleri distributing free water to all these policemen, sanitation workers, paramedical staff, giving free water to everyone. And then there's empathy and concern in the communication, which
Sorry to interrupt, Pankaj.
Yes. Okay.
I think we have lesser time. Yeah.
I will close in another 2 minutes. So everybody knows Sonu Sood. He has gone out and he was very empathetic and had concern with, and immediately Pepsi roped him in and brought out their communication. So I will skip other communication. I will come to the last one, which is this, that you don't have to be very insensitive. You have to be very careful what you are messaging, because there have been instances where messaging has gone wrong. For instance, this Kentaro. So they have advertised, are you allowing your maid to knead atta dough by hand? Her hands may be infected. And there was a backlash from people outside that this is not done, that you cannot tell that a maid's hands would be infected. It could be anyone. So why particularly? So there was a backlash, and later Mr. Mahesh Gupta, the chairman, issued a statement that he is withdrawing the ad, and this ad was came in a bad taste. So you have to be, my point is that you have to be very, very careful in communication. It has to be transparent, empathetic, and you have to be very, very careful. And people have actually come out and with a very good communication, and actually had a good chord with their outside stakeholders. Thank you. Yes, Rohini, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pankaj. Good ads. Yeah.
I think Rohani's
Rohini, you are on mute.
is mute.
You're on mute. Rohini, you're on mute.
Rohini, you are on mute.
Yes, sorry for that. So Pradeep, you can talk to us about the supply chain management.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Roni and Dr. Pankaj, for these nice presentations which you made about the changing environment and consumer behavior. What I am going to do is present, because of this changed environment and, changed consumer behavior, one of the most important things which has changed in the ecosystem is the supply chain. So I'm going to talk about supply chain and give you an idea that how is it working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the key consumer behavior thresholds which has impacted supply chain during this COVID and how it is going to be there in the coming future. You can see my screens, please?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Okay. We all know COVID has been the most devastating, pandemics in the recent history. It continues. The economy is down. Lockdowns and distancing is still there, and it is still going to continue. More than 8 million cases have happened globally, and if we see India is 5 lakhs plus now. So this COVID has not only changed, the entire environment, but it has changed three typical things when we talk about consumer behavior. So the first thing which it has changed is the consumer behavior. The second thing which has changed because of this COVID and the pandemic is the market dynamics. And the third one obviously is the supply chain. I think everyone must have read in this recent times that supply chain was a big pain, and which has resulted in many people to think how to rework on the supply chain. The 6 consumer behavior thresholds is, the first one is proactive health minded buying. What it essentially means is the consumers now, their interest is to buy more healthier products, hygienic products, and probably, not buy the non-essential products. So that the entire thinking is that we should buy the products which can maintain the house. There can be hygiene, there can be health, there can be wellness in the family. The second important thing which is happening is the reactive health management. The reactive health management in the consumer mind means, basically that now health has become the first most priority for every consumer, and anything to do with health is the priority. So in these times, if you have noticed, the customers have prioritized products essential to virus containment, health, and public safety measures like sanitizers, face mask, sanitizing equipments, etc. The third consumer behavior which is important is which took place is, you must have seen a lot of people standing outside the shop trying to stockpile a lot of groceries for their house, a lot of medicines for their house. So the third important thing is pantry preparation. People started going to the shops, to the medicine shops, and they started buying a lot of things to keep, because the uncertainty was there. So they wanted to stockpile things in their house, and that still continues to some levels. So there was a growing basket size happening in this entire COVID period, and it still continues in many parts of the world. This also led to the fourth behavior that, people have got, confined to quarantined living preparation. Earlier, people were not worried about anything. Today, people have to worry about, being quarantined in a particular place, and hence the habits have changed. One of the habits is that they have started increased online shopping. There is a decrease in the store visits. There's a problem of stocks not available in the marketplace, and there has been strains on the supply chain because of the quarantined living conditions. The next obvious thing is restricted living. Because of quarantine, because of the COVID happening, because of the uncertainty of pandemic, and because of the fear psychosis, the customers are into restricted living. So the shopping trips have reduced, the travel has reduced, the other things have reduced. So the only way for them to probably ensure is online fulfillment, and the e-commerce and the online fulfillment has increased, whereas the physical way of going to the shops and getting things have reduced. With this pandemic on and things going on, and there is no certainty, the living now in the coming days, in the coming months, would be a little different. People are accustomed to a new living, where people are trying to change their habits. People are trying to live in their house. People are trying to have healthy things. People are trying to build up their immunity, and they, because of these 5-6 reasons, the entire supply chain needs a change. So let me talk about few things here. See, the challenges which we faced in this in the supply chain in this period was, the supply chain and mobility issues were very, very alarming. You did not have supply chain happening, you did not have mobility. Last mile mobility had become a big issue. Production capacity had become a big issue. There was challenges in sourcing the raw materials, because because of the lockdown, because of the manufacturing units closed and restricted transportation. There was a price surge in the entire raw and packaging material. In fact, there was a price surge even in the transportation and supply chain, because of the restricted manpower, restricted transportation, restricted materials available in the marketplace. There was there were issues on cash flows. There was issues on engaging with customers, because the only way to engage with customers was now online relationship management. And this is what was the entire supply chain picture in this coming days, in this recent months. And last but not the least was that the non-essential goods, whatever any household wanted, they parked their non-essential requirements, and the concentration was only on getting into the essential requirements. The other bigger thing which happened in this COVID times is people adopted to quality and efficacy, right? So today people are very, very conscious. They believe in they wanted to believe in quality products. They wanted to believe in efficacy. So, for example, consumers started using face masks. They started washing their hands multiple times. They started using hand sanitizers. They stayed away from public gatherings. They maintained social distancing, and they also had vitamin tablets to ensure the immunity is high. So, to give you a little more idea on the supply chain, I am focusing on 4 major segments. One is pharma and medical supplies. The other one is CPG and distribution industry. CPG is basically consumer packaged goods. So consumer packaged goods is essentially covering the segments of home and personal care, food and beverages, alcohol, beverages, tobacco, apparel and footwear, beauty and cosmetics, toys and games, food distribution. And I will